Today I want to talk to you about a verse in Exodus chapter 3. And you know how the Bible is, and I love it for this because you can be reading the same passage that you read last year or even a decade ago, but a different verse will jump out at you. It'll jump off the page, and God's Spirit is interacting with your spirit, and He's saying, hey, look, zero in on this. I've got a word for you. I'm going to minister to you now where you're at in this season. I'm going to speak to you about a struggle you're having, or about my glory, or my plan, or the kingdom, or humanity, any number of things. And you could read the same section, the same chapter, 10 times, and that 11th time you can notice something completely different. And that's why I love the Word. In Exodus, a familiar story is the deliverance of God's people from Egypt, out of Egypt, to the promised land, to Canaan, to the land flowing with milk and honey. And the main character besides God, of course, is Moses. And Moses is in the backside of the wilderness. He has run away. He has fled. He's got blood on his hands. And so he flees out of Egypt to Midian, and he's back there, and he finds a new life, and he gets married, and he's got family, and he's got purpose, and he has an encounter on Mount Horeb with God in the burning bush. Another popular story, one you've probably heard. And so the story goes on. God speaks to him. He tells him what he's supposed to do. He says, I'm sending you to Pharaoh, and you're going to be my deliverer. I'm hearing the cry of my people, and I want to do something, and you're my man. You're going to go to Pharaoh, and you're going to lead the people out of bondage into freedom. And of course, that was a long road, but that was the overall plan. And then we have the 10 plagues, or the 10 miracles. We have the parting of the Red Sea on top of that. So a really fantastic story, than one that you're probably familiar with, and I've read it and I've heard it dozens of times. But just recently I was reading it again, and this little section in Exodus 3 jumped out at me. Of course, God appears to Moses in the burning bush, and he tells him what he's going to do. And in chapter 3, verse 10, God says, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Just before then, he says, I've heard their cry. And if you've been crying out to God for breakthrough for you or a loved one, first of all, God hears your cry. Just because something is not happening right now, just because it looks as if nothing has changed or God hasn't heard, don't believe the hype. Don't get caught up in the bluff of the enemy. Believe in faith. God has heard your cry and is going to do something about it. It just takes time. So here we are, back to the burning bush, back to the Lord and Moses. He says, hey, I'm sending you to Pharaoh. I'm sending you back to where you ran from. Amen. I'm sending you to go to Pharaoh, to the king, to the president of this powerful nation, and you're going to command that he allows these slaves to be freed, hundreds of thousands, and their families. And Moses has to feel intimidated by the task. It's so daunting. Could you imagine going back and you're just imagining there's going to be wanted posters. There's a warrant out for his arrest. He's a murderer. Someone's going to remember. Someone's going to see him. And not only does he have to go just through town or go back to Egypt to do some random thing, he's got to go to Pharaoh on top of all that and command that God's people must be let go. So you can imagine Moses is feeling underqualified, to say the least. In his response, he says in verse 11, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And God says to him, but I will be with you. And this will be the sign that I have spoken to you, that I have sent you. When you bring the people of Israel out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Verse 12. How powerful, how awesome is that? Moses is feeling intimidated. He's feeling overwhelmed, underqualified, to say the least. And God says, hey, you're nobody without me, but I will be with you. I've called you to do this. You're my chosen instrument for this task at this moment. And we have those moments. We've all had those moments where we feel like God has told us, you need to do this. You need to make this phone call. You need to make it right. You need to help this person. You need to slow down over here. You need to speed up over there. You need to spend less time at work and more time with your family. You need to rest more on the Sabbath. You need to, whatever it may be, you need to start writing that book, whatever it may be. And we hear that, and who am I? Or we think about the bigness of it and we get overwhelmed. And God says, don't worry. I will be with you. And sometimes He gives us a sign. Sometimes He gives us that fleece moment a la Gideon. Sometimes He gives us the confirmation of a prophetic word from another believer. Sometimes it's right in front of us. It's so obvious what we're to do, and we're encouraged along the way. But then there's other times where that's not the case, and this wasn't the case with Moses. I love it. And this is the verse that jumped out at me when I read this the other day. He said, this is the sign that I will be with you, and I've called you to do this, is when you've done it. Think about that. After the fact, you shall serve God on this mountain. He says, I'm going to send you out here. I'm going to put you out on a limb. You've got this intimidating, daunting task. And you know how you know that I've called you to do that? Is when it's all said and done, we're going to fellowship here on the mountain of God. We're going to commune. We're going to celebrate. You're going to praise me, God says. And folks, that's what I feel like the word of the Lord is speaking to us today. That sometimes we get the confirmation after the fact. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all have something that God is calling us to do today to bring forth His plan, His kingdom on earth. So I encourage you as you go throughout your day is to think about, reflect upon what God has called you to do. It may be something big. It may be something small. Odds are it's not something as fantastic as Moses. It may be even just a first step or a second step in a process and a big plan. And God says, hey, I need you to do this. Take this step. Take this leap of faith. And when you've taken this leap of faith, I will speak to you about the things after that. So take a moment. Get away from the world a little bit. Get away from the hustle and the bustle. Turn off your phone and the TV and all the different things. And allow your mind to settle down a little bit. And get connected with the Spirit of God. And hear from Him what it is you are to do. And then determine in your heart, make a decision. I'm going to do that thing. And you say, God, I'm sorry for waiting. I'm sorry for not believing. And it's okay to ask for more faith and to ask for courage. Just be real with God. Amen? Amen. He's calling you. He's calling you. Do it. Do it. Amen. Love you. Until next time, God bless.